Okay, so if you watched my last video, you would know that I asked you guys for some recommendations for Lovecraftian anime to watch, and you guys, gave me quite a lot. God almighty. I did ask you to do that though, so I can't really complain. Some of you recommended the same thing like 1,000 times, and others recommended shows and other media that I had no idea existed. But I'm a man of my word. I mean, that's a lie. I probably will watch them. I read anything. So I picked 5 of the recommendations to watch, and some of them were peak cinema, and others made me want to rip my eyes out. Though not because they were bad. Most, if not all of the shows were good in some way. Now, I will be talking about spoilers for practically every show, so please be aware that I might spoil some massive reveals and characters. So, let's see what you guys recommended the most. Holy shit. Yes. The problem is, I've already watched this show. Lord of the Mysteries is, first and foremost, a very beautiful show, and a show I'm surprised that I forgot to talk about in the previous video. The animation is absolutely gorgeous, with the monsters and the feeling of the world having that perfect level of unnervingness, where you can't tell exactly what is wrong, but that there is a lot more to what is being shown to you. And it is a very faithful interpretation of what Lovecraftian horror is, and nails the atmosphere of what the original stories by Lovecraft had. And the thing I love the most is that they actually used a gothic/Victorian aesthetic. People when using Lovecraftian horror usually implement it into modern day, and that can lead to interesting stories. But I find Lovecraftian horror is at its strongest when the world is still a bit Victorian/steampunky. When you are fighting these gods from the void in the modern day, you have access to, of course, modern day items and ideas, and this can be cool. I mean, the Doom franchise is a perfect example of modern day Lovecraftianism. But I find, to tell a story that unnerves you, which is what Lovecraftian horror is meant to do, you need to withhold quite a lot of information, something that doesn't really work in our modern world, because of how quickly information gets spread around. Sure, the gods are just as powerful as before, but one of the strongest pillars of Lovecraftian horror is the fear of the unknown, and in modern stories, it kind of just feels unrealistic to me when a massive cult of people with rituals all over the world and Lovecraftian events happening left, right, and center is treated as something they could have never seen coming. But when set in Victorian/steampunk times, this is a point of history where exploration was the name of the game, where everybody wanted to go everywhere to explore everything. And since they had no idea of what they were walking into, the discovery of Lovecraftian elements beyond the civilized world feels so much more terrifying. It shatters your worldview that this world is ours to conquer. It juxtaposes the world of science and technology, one who has just discovered industrialization and believes that nothing can stop them, with the crushing reality and terror that this world and its people are playthings for gods. And you may say that the cults and other rituals are out in the open, so it loses that sense of mystery, and that is sort of true. But remember, we are experiencing this world through Klein's eyes, someone who is inherently tied to that world of cult and mysticism. Of course, we are going to be at the forefront of the story experiencing these most extravagant events. And to the average person, sure, they know about some of the more well-known gods, like the Evernight goddess, but for the underground and evil gods, like the Demoness sect, they know practically nothing. Like, it is shown that they believe that an exorcism uses garlic, which is clearly not true. And Klein's experiences of slowly discovering that this world is so much more than what is on the surface perfectly replicates that feeling of the scientists in the Mountains of Madness. And as much as isekai gets dogged on, in this situation, it is used in a perfect way, because usually as an isekai protagonist, you know nothing. And when going into this world, you learn the basic surface level stuff, but then it is slowly revealed that it is so much more, which is just exactly what I love about Lovecraftian horror. Another thing I love is the power system. You probably know about how in most Lovecraftian stories, sanity and your mind are two of the most talked about and explored points, and how the human mind, with only its basic physiology, is ill-equipped to comprehend beings of immeasurable proportions. How even the sight of these gods makes the common man go insane. That's not to say most of these gods have a power that instantly makes you insane. Holy shit, this is a misconception that refuses to die. And the system of sequences perfectly encapsulates that. If you are able to handle the power that the potions grant you and can mentally resist the urges of the gods, you can even become a quite literal god. And the methods of the Beyonders and their rituals with all the different cults feel eerily similar to the cults we see in Lovecraftian stories. But if you can't handle the potions, if your mind is not able to handle the power given to you, you spiral further and further, eventually becoming something akin to a Shoggoth in most aspects. When you make a deal with gods, you better be prepared for what comes after. And this is similar to how Randolph Carter, after making a deal with Yog-Sothoth, to be specific, he didn't make a deal with Yog-Sothoth, he was just allowed to transition to a higher dimension of existence, and eventually getting trapped in the body of Azakba. He wanted to return to human form, but is unable to, forever trapped in the body of an alien, fighting its consciousness over the control of its body. And probably the best part about this show that I loved above all else is the world building. This is how you do good world building, because it actually feels real and understandable if you know what you're talking about. When something happens or is talked about, it feels more like a slice of a massive, humongous pie, rather than them trying to fill in the gaps of a lacking story. The fact that there is a full conlang that doesn't look stereotypical is a treat for someone who is trying to make their own. And for the entire first season, it takes place in one city, but it feels as if it takes place in a whole country. There's shops, streets, culture local to the city, and so much more. And the choice to only use British voice actors in the dub makes it even better. It makes it feel so much more immersive.
The one catches our old lease isn't up, and that slumlord won't return our deposit.
Now, I only watched the first season of the show and didn't read any of the light novels or stories. And if the story is going to be adapted like this, I'm most definitely going to sit on my ass and wait for the new seasons, because I'm an 86 fan and I am used to sitting on my ass with no fucking news. And this first season, for the most part, was more of a setup. Sure, it had cool characters with Erwin 2.0 and a whole cult of trans people, and some really interesting nods to otherworldly powers like the fog and the upside down god, but it definitely was not a complete story. After finishing it, I was left with more questions than answers, so I'll have to wait for the later seasons, because this story seems really fucking cool, and needs way more time to get going. Okay, let's look at the next one. Now, unfortunately, being a part of the anime community for a really long time, Madoka Magica's story has already kind of been spoiled for me. I mean, it's unavoidable to piece together what's going to happen when a show that people say is interesting, and the poster looks like this. And so many shows and games after it have tried to replicate this kind of cute to terrifying horror, so it was inevitable that the reveal would be kind of spoiled. Oh my god, it's Teto! I didn't know Teto was in Madoka! Teto? However, that's not to say the story was completely spoiled. There were many aspects of the story that were still great reveals to discover, and the biggest reveal, I think, is probably the most cosmic horror-like aspect of the story. Sure, the witches are terrifying, and the scrapbook style they have is so cool, showing how otherworldly they are by using real-world images inside of an anime world, and more traditional styles of animation akin to French stop motion. However, the reveal that the witches and the magical girls are a power source for a far distant alien civilization feels so much more terrifying to me and much more in line with what I think cosmic horror is meant to be. Cosmic horror's biggest strength is showing how insignificant humans are to the power of gods, and in this case, the aliens, which are practically gods with what they are able to do. They are able to transition through space at speeds that seem ridiculous, can give people magical powers, and can grant wishes that seem physically impossible to achieve. And the most terrifying aspect about them is that they completely lack what they call emotions. Similar to how the Lovecraftian gods don't care about humans or what suffering they inflict, so too do these Kyubey. They don't act on what they want, but what they deem necessary, only acting and doing things that logically work, rather than emotionally. And when they see humans, they try their best to replicate some of emotion to appeal to our emotions as a way to encourage us to become part of their system of magical girls and witches. And that is pretty freaking scary. It's similar to how Nyarlathotep manipulates your emotions to get you to be fed to Azathoth. And this is an interesting point that the show discussed, and something that's very hard to explore. Because what are emotions in this context? Sure, obviously emotions are feelings of love, hate, worry, sadness. But I've seen people discuss desires emotions as well. When do these two things cross? Because for the most part, Kyubey and the alien race as a whole lack emotions and don't understand feelings of love and hate. But then, when Madoka makes her wish, Kyubey seemingly expresses a form of being worried and scared, seemingly worried for Madoka's own safety and how it will break their system of witches and power. Now, this could be because they have gotten so good at replicating emotions as to prevent Madoka from making this wish, but even then, it still feels weird to see. And is the want to prevent the collapse of their civilization from entropy not an emotion? Like, it's something to think about. And I think this is not the fault of the characters, but rather it is a fault of us as writers. If this were hypothetically a first-person account of events in the story, Kyubey would probably be a perfectly logical machine, something like an AI, for example. However, since it is a person writing the story, of course there's going to be some kind of bias behind how we write. We can't help but project our own humanity and preconceived notions onto cold logical machines. And funnily enough, that kind of makes it even more scary, because we can't comprehend how these aliens would act, so we have to kind of unconsciously censor it ourselves so that we can even sort of look at them. Like, in the words of Barry Taylor, God is the blanket we overthrow the mystery to give it shape. And even though this is referring to how we use God as a cloak to explain the mysteries of the universe, this metaphysical blanket can be the way we interpret these gods, because only through their interactions with us and blocking out what they truly are can we ever hope to truly comprehend them. Housing Complex C, out of all of the shows I watched, was the most faithful and felt the most like a true Lovecraftian story. You know how I said that modern day Lovecraftian stories don't really work? Well, this is one that was actually really good, so I just completely lied. It honestly felt like something Lovecraft himself would have written, with the use of cults, the length of the story being only 4 episodes, so just a normal short story, and the use of foreigners and racism. Hell yeah! And because it felt like something truly Lovecraftian, this one was the most confusing to watch. Now, whenever I talk about a series, I generally don't like recounting the story to you, because 1, it bloats the video making it longer, which can make it boring and makes more unnecessary work. 2, it is always better to read the original story to truly experience it. And 3, I much prefer getting straight to the point. So for this series, I implore you to go watch it before this, because it's short and will let you truly understand what I'm going to discuss. And I'm pretty sure it's for free on Adult Swim, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, so first of all, the cult of Kurosaki and the Dead Sea god Cthulhu are clear parallels to Cthulhu and his own cult of fish people. Cthulhu is technically dead in the Lovecraftian mythos, or specifically he hasn't been able to manifest into the physical realm, and their respective cults sacrifice people in order to resurrect them. However, in Housing Complex C, they sacrifice not to Cthulhu, but to another god, Iyo-yo-loki Soyohosu, a kind of sky god akin to Yog-Sothoth. However, what I love about the show is its use of subversion. It's very good at making you believe one thing and then completely flipping your perspective without it feeling like an arsepool. It uses your own prejudice against you. For example, initially the story makes you believe that the new foreigners, especially Khan, are behind the weird happenings in the town. Now, they are clearly made out to be Muslim in the story, so I'm going to have to be very careful with how I go forward with this. But as you probably know, Japan is not very fond of foreigners, especially older people who make up the majority of the housing in the show. Of course, not every person is racist and or xenophobic. The show literally has a guy or multiple people who are just not racist. And in the original Lovecraftian works, most of the evil cultists are usually foreigners and undesirables of society. Like, just give the Call of Cthulhu a read and you'll see what I mean. However, the story subverts this expectation, that instead of the foreigners being the ones behind everything, it was actually other Japanese people. The family just uses the foreigners as red herrings and false leads to lead others away from them. And of course, since anime is firstly meant for a Japanese audience, this reveal is definitely meant to be much more impactful than to us Western audiences. Now, like I said, we have to be careful, but the show feels as if it is trying to say that evil can come from anywhere, not just from who you initially think is at fault, because so many people are quick to blame foreigners for their problems, where the problem is not them, but it was actually already here before they arrived. And obviously, that is a wrong thing to do, and the show makes it very clear at no point are the foreigners truly to blame. And to a Japanese audience, one where anti-immigration rhetoric is on the rise, this is a very powerful message and one that needs to be heard. I mean, even outside of Japan, it needs to be heard everywhere. Evil is not just from the others, it is from us, it is from everyone. And my other favorite part about the show is that it also flips the relationship between humans and these outer gods. Now, I'm hoping you watch the show, like I told you to, but it is revealed in the last episode that Kimi, the local happy-go-lucky girl, was actually a god in disguise. And being born from a human mother, this draws parallels to the Dunwich Horror, how Wilbur Whateley and the Horror were actually Yog-Sothoth's sons. Specifically, Kimi is the sky god I mentioned earlier, the one with the unpronounceable name. She had trapped this town in a time loop in the year 2000, where she would spend her days among the people seeing if they were worthy of gaining access to infinity. But the funny thing is, she seems more human than the humans around her, and her name, Kimi, feels much more on the nose with how she is trying to be human, with Kimi in Japanese meaning you. When the people start arguing or in a bad spot, she is the one to cheer them up. Now that's of course because everyone sees her as a nice young girl, so they don't want to upset her. But it's funny to see an all-powerful reality-warping god have more humanity than others, though that is probably because this god is also omniscient, so they know everything. And when it is revealed that the new family that moved in with all the foreigners is actually part of the ancient cult, being the ones behind all the killings, it shows that people as well can be just as evil or even worse than the gods we fear so much. And because of their actions, Kimi, or Iyoloki Shoyohosu, decides that humanity is not worthy of infinity, showing how the actions of only the few can massively impact the experience of the many. Also, Rubel has to be one of the smartest characters in any horror story. He saw that shit was getting weird and decided to fuck off out of there. The summer Hikaru died. Now, come on, it isn't that gay. It's just some homies who like each other a Damn. This show was on par with Lord of the Mysteries for being the most beautiful show I watched. It felt like I was watching a Makoto Shinkai film, but as a series. Cygames with their Uma Musume money have decided to use that sacrifice of the citizens of Japan to give us god-tier animation. Well, anyways, we aren't here to talk about animation, though that does massively improve the experience. We're here for Lovecraft. Or, not really. So, of course, the main source of terror is the reality of Yoshiki having to live and constantly interact with a monster of some kind that has taken the form of his boyfriend, Hikaru. And this monster, whatever it is a weird amorphous mess of stuff, short of like I said, a shoggoth, and that has the texture of raw chicken. And this show combines this kind of horror with traditional Japanese folklore monsters and yokai, which themselves are even more terrifying. Though that's not the horror of it. The horror is that Yoshiki has to somehow live his life while simultaneously handling a monster that has attached itself to him, and it hurts twice over. One, because it is a terrifying monster that clearly has the power to kill him if he wants, and two, because it is his best friend. However, I wouldn't call this series a Lovecraftian story, rather it only has Lovecraftian elements. Sure, it is a horror, but only sort of. It has the scary monsters and scared conservative village folk, but it is really a facade for the real point, which is the homosexual undertones of the story, which I'm pretty sure you could have guessed if you watched it. Yoshiki is, for the most part, homosexual, being attracted to Hikaru, and this is the conflict that the show explores the most. He loves Hikaru, and now being given another chance to live with him, he is conflicted. He doesn't know what he should do, because one, this is not the real Hikaru, it's a fake one. So his feelings to the new one feel like a betrayal to the original, in my opinion. But then again, he still loved him, and he is back, practically the same as before, and now with the added bonus that this is a monster that is able to protect him from otherworldly threats. So, should he throw away this gift? And it's not like he easily can though, as the fake Hikaru has also, like I said, attached himself to him. And Hikaru in Japanese means to glitter, to be bright. So to Yoshiki, Hikaru is the light in his world, a world that oppresses his love and desires, because the show makes it quite clear that the people of the village don't like his and others' homosexuality. I mean, Yoshiki is in the closet, as you would put it, but they tease him for being really close with Hikaru, and the original one called another homosexual character Diseased, though more out of ignorance than hatred, I believe. And this monster, with the townsfolk constantly trying to find it and remove it, feels similar to how homosexuality is treated. They treat Yoshiki's love as monstrous, something unnatural, which is what the new Hikaru is meant to represent. Society's treatment of homosexuality as a disease, something that needs to be kept away, something that needs to be kept on a mountain, something not allowed to interact with the rest of society. And honestly, that's the most Lovecraftian thing about the show, because Lovecraft himself was friends with a very openly gay man called Samuel Loveman. Oh, the irony. And he himself was confused. He was a really dear friend. He helped him in his work and supported his publishing. He considered Loveman the highest degree of poet, but he hated his Jewish ancestry and sexuality. And when Loveman found out about this deep-rooted hatred, he was also confused and upset, because why would his bestest friend have such hate for his people, but not for him? So the summer Hikaru died is less and more Lovecraftian in ways than what you would expect. Okay, so one last show. Now, in the last video, the last show was a comedy, and so for this one, this next show is also a sort of comedy, Necronomico and the Cosmic Horror Show. And would you look at that? It has anime-fied Lovecraftian monsters, quite literally ripped out of the mythos. Let's see which ones are in the show. Oh, would you look at that? It also has Hestor. Hopefully this time they won't make him a twinkified Shota. Fuck! Okay, maybe they make Cthulhu terrifying at least, because he's also here.
Lord have mercy. We must
Shit. Why does Japan keep doing this? Okay, maybe the show will be funny at least. I mean, what else can it do? Never mind, this show is the peakest of all peak. Nothing compares to this. This is the best show. Okay, jokes aside, this show was really weird. And in the best possible way. This show does not take itself seriously in the slightest. Or it kind of does, but it can recognize the stupidity of the situation. It is the personification of expect the unexpected. Lovecraftian monsters trapped inside of Sword Art Online decide to make a Japanese game show to gain physical form, and they get YouTubers and streamers to participate. Okay, great. And the best part is that the show actually uses modern slang and memes correctly, or they used ones that have aged really well. Like in the first episode, when the stakes of the game are still unclear and there are a lot of players still, they use fucking Fall Guys to play the game show. It's so dumb. And all of the gods feel incredibly stupid and funny. Now, it is stated in the show that they are actually using the bodies of their victims, and their mental states and thoughts rubbed off on the characters. And if you were trapped in the body of a streamer or a YouTuber, you too would start to lose brain cells. I know. Because I am. And just like Nyanoko-san, it makes references to other characters and places that the average person would not know about. So it doesn't feel weird or incorrect. And it is always funny to point and laugh at funny references. Like, we have Cthulhu back again, along with Nyarlathotep, but we also have Gartanatoa and Cthulhu now as well. Though there are some aspects of the show that I did find a bit disappointing, moreover. It uses tropes that are so overdone in anime that it can become a bit boring, with the VR world, if you die in the game, you die in real life, and the overly loud as fuck protagonist. And it can fall a bit flat at times, with its characters just not making sense or being evil for the sake of being evil, though these issues didn't really negatively impact the show. In all honesty, it actually just made it better. So this show is best when you are going in with a mind like, I'm about to see a big titty Cthulhu. Don't take it seriously, and you'll have a fantastic time with it. However, unfortunately, you may notice that the show is quite lowly rated on Mal and other websites. However, this is not because the show is bad, as you can clearly see. It's more a 7 out of 10, to be honest. And the reason it's so lowly rated is because the subtitling company that Crunchyroll used, I believe for the German translation, used AI to translate the subtitles. And the funny thing is, Crunchyroll explicitly asked them not to use AI. It was literally in their contract, and they did anyway. It's funny to see Crunchyroll not being the one at fault for once. And when the first episode was released and people saw the AI, they review bombed it, because of course. And it's been fixed now, there's no more AI in translations, it's all human made, but it's such a shame. It's a decent show, and people don't want to go back and give it another chance just because of the actions of a bad company. So, it's not something that'll blow your socks off, but it'll at least give you a good laugh. Alright, that was really stupid, but a lot of fun. Thanks for all the recommendations for the shows to watch. They were actually pretty good. Some of them were really deep and made me question humanity, while others had even gayer King and Yellows. I thought that Nyaruku-san couldn't be topped, but here we are. And by the time this video goes live, I'll have made a new community post about the next recommendation video, because the last one did so well that I'd be stupid not to do a third. Because this was so much fun. And if you want to recommend something to me, please go and read the community post, though feel free to recommend anything in the comments here as well. I read them all anyway. Because watching entire series in their full is not a good way to find new good series. It takes far too long. But anyway, keep them coming. I'll probably watch them in the future. Eventually.